And this is, when Vlad and I are out drinking, before it goes downhill and we're trying to have a civilized conversation, I always ask Vlad, what was the biggest culture shock? What are you adjusting to? And apart from the efficiency and the time, which, by the way, I can see you're getting adjusted to because you were also 15 minutes late. But apart from that, what were the other big culture shocks that you want to tell us? Because I'm really fascinated about that.
And when I came to Kenya as a total newbie. I had no idea what I was doing. I had a certain amount of money that I thought, as ignorant American, I could come to Kenya and I could build a palace of a school, no problem. I mean, I could build 12 schools with this amount of money. And I came and I found out that I barely had enough money to buy the land. So that was a real shock. Coming to Kenya, I thought I was all ready to go and I had no idea what I was doing.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Patel, the managing partner of E3 Capital.
Hi, everyone. I'm Vladimir Dugin. I'm a partner at E3 Capital.
So today we're going to do our very first podcast, and the main reason for doing the podcast is Vlad and I, we meet entrepreneurs on a daily basis. We hear absolutely fascinating stories. So what we're trying to do is release some of the glimpse of our daily lives in uncovering the truths of building real businesses in Africa.
Yeah, I think what's interesting is that we meet so many entrepreneurs on a daily basis. And I think what we realized that there are different groups of entrepreneurs, mostly based on where they're coming from. Let's say there are entrepreneurs from Western Europe, US, Eastern Europe, local entrepreneurs. And many of these groups don't talk to each other, but have very, very valuable stories to tell and share their insights. So we are trying to bring them together to let them share their knowledge and also share it with the ecosystem. And today we have our first guest, social entrepreneur and executive director of Fleischer Foundation, Stephen Fleischer. Welcome.
Thanks so much, Vladimir. I'm honored to be your first guest. I hope I do you both proud for your very, very first podcast.
So Stephen, tell us, where are you coming from and what are you doing in Kenya?
Thanks very much. So like you said, my name is Stephen Fleischer. I actually grew up in the United States, right in New York City, in Manhattan. And I ended up coming to Kenya for my very first time right after undergrad university. And this was something in the United States that was very, very popular at the time, and I think it still is, which is doing this gap year before your next step in life. I was an undergrad, a finance major. I had offers at various hedge funds in New York City, and I thought that I needed 1 year to figure myself out first. I came to Kenya. I never thought I was going to stay in Kenya, and I'll tell you about how that happened in a few moments. But I came to Kenya for 1 year, and I worked at a school in a slum environment, which is commonly known as informal settlement, at a school that just did not have the ability to hire enough teachers for the students that they hosted. So I was a teacher at the school for 1 year, and it was a life-changing event that led me to stay years and years down the line.
Thanks, that's very interesting. And what was your first impression when you came from New York to Kenya? What is that, the highlight? What you liked or maybe you didn't like?
We could have a podcast for 2 hours just talking about that question, the differences between Kenya and New York. And I'll touch on a couple things that I think are most interesting for me. But I'll tell you, one of the things that jumped out at me was a similarity, actually, between Nairobi and New York City. There's just an energy in Nairobi, and it's the same energy you see in New York City. Now, it manifests differently, that's for sure. But there's a hustle, there's a bustle, there's an intent, there's movement, there's businesses popping up everywhere. There's an energy to it that I was immediately drawn to. I've loved Nairobi because it reminded me of home. It reminds me of New York City. Now, Nairobi also comes with many challenges, right? I'm used to the United States, which I would say is not the happiest of places, but is certainly a very efficient place. Things happen quickly. You want to renew your driving license, you get it in a day or two. Kenya has a different background to that, and that was certainly an adjustment. And there's a story I always tell about one of these adjustments, which is that in Kenya, we're very warm, but we're not always 100% on time. And my favorite on-time story for Kenya is when I first rented my home in Kenya, my first time living in Kenya, my girlfriend at the time and I decided to have a housewarming party. We have a housewarming party at 5:30 p.m. We set up all the little decorations in the house. We have the cheese boards here and the salamis here and the water and the wine here. And at 6 o'clock, not one person showed up. And at 6:30, not one person showed up. Well, at 7 p.m., my girlfriend and I decided we just might as well eat the salami and call it a day. I guess no one wanted to come to the housewarming party. And then at 7:30, 2 hours later, about 50 people showed up. So these are one of the differences. But I will tell you, overall, my experience in Kenya has been wonderful. I find people much more welcoming, much more kind. I find there's much more of a priority in Kenya to spend time with one another, to invite someone over, to cook for someone, than in New York, which has a very, very different kind of business culture to it.
You know, Stephen, that's really fascinating because I'm Kenyan, right? And I grew up in Kenya, and I chose 10 years ago to come back to Kenya. So I spent 15 years in London, and I decided to come to Kenya. And that was a huge culture shock, even given the fact that I grew up in Kenya, right? And this is, when Vlad and I are out drinking, before it goes downhill and we're trying to have a civilized conversation, I always ask Vlad, what was the biggest culture shock? What are you adjusting to? And apart from the efficiency and the time, which, by the way, I can see you're getting adjusted to because you were also 15 minutes late. But apart from that, what were the other big culture shocks that you want to tell us? Because I'm really fascinated about that.
Well, I'll say one thing, and I know you guys are focused on the business element of this. I find running a business in Nairobi to be different than my experiences in business in the US. Now, I did not have a business in the US. Certainly, the charity has an arm in the United States. But the charity's arm in the United States is very, very minimal. Its arm in Kenya is where it does all of its good work. But managing a business, I find, is tricky. You have a dynamic in Kenya that's ever moving. I see, we have a very lean team because we don't believe in having a big staff for a charity. We believe in helping as many kids as possible. But I see, especially my chief employee's salary, change almost every single month. Because every single month, there's a new tax that I need to have an accountant for to understand these new tax, understand these new complexities. So managing a business in Kenya, I think, is a lot harder than it would be in the US. That was a shock to me. And I'll say this too, especially when it comes to construction, which I know we'll get into in a second. I don't want to jump the gun. But one of the things I'm trying to do here is to build a really world-class school that services some of the most needy but most intelligent kids we can find in Kenya. And to construct a school, you need to find people who not just have the skills to consult for you, but who also share that vision and share that belief. Yeah. And finding someone who believes in what you believe in and has the time to dedicate to you, I find that hard. I find it hard to find a good group of people to support you. And when you find the good group of people, sometimes I find that they might not have the time to give to your project. So narrowing those two groups, finding a good person and finding someone who has the time to dedicate to you, I find that to be really, really hard here in Kenya.
Yeah, you're definitely not the first to say that, and I don't suspect the last. But yeah.
So you came here for the first time, then you went back, then you decided to come back.
Exactly.
So what brings you here now? What is that you're doing? And maybe you can just tell us a bit more about your project.
Sure. So when I was here for 1 year, I noticed a need. I mean, there are many needs, but I noticed one need in particular that jumped out at me. And what I noticed was that in Kenya, elementary school, primary school is subsidized by the government. Effectively, and this isn't 100% true, but effectively, even if you're from one of the neediest families in Kenya, you can go to elementary school. That stops being true when high school begins. High school is not fully subsidized. So even public schools in high school will cost you about $1,000 to go. And I think both of you know, and I'm sure some of the viewers know as well, but $1,000 for someone from an informal settlement, $1,000 from someone from a slum is just impossible.
Is that a year or a term?
A year. Okay. A year. So that figure is just impossible. And the common saying, certainly we hear it a lot in the US, is about $1 a day is the income. That is more or less true. So you're talking about $30 to $60 a month in wages from people living in informal settlements in Kenya, and you're talking about $1,000 a year for high school. It's just not possible. It just can't happen. So when I was teaching in that 1 year you mentioned, Vladimir, in this school in a slum called Makuru Kwanjenga, I taught 8th grade, class 8 maths. I had a class of 77 students. Not one of my students went to high school after. And that just upset me to know.
Because they couldn't afford it.
Because they couldn't afford it, exactly. And that upset me to my core. So I have no way of fixing 77 students to go to school. But there were a couple students in my class that were standouts. Kids that could be the next president of Kenya, kids that could be CEOs of big companies, kids that could be doctors and lawyers and pilots. And they all had those dreams. You would talk to them and they would have these dreams. But you can't sugarcoat it. They have no way of ever achieving those dreams. So I wanted to make a small difference. I called my dad and I said, can you give me $1,000 US, let's sponsor the #1 student in my class. Right. He gave me $1,000, he sponsored one kid to go to high school. And after that, I got another friend of my family and we said, can you sponsor one student as well? And we had 2 students. I went back to the US, as you alluded to, Vladimir, and my family members continued supporting some students in Kenya. And eventually they said, Stephen, this is silly. We're not giving you $1,000 every year to your personal checking account. Let's create a foundation. Let's create something where we can harness the money and do it properly in an organized way. So we started a foundation, the Fleischer Family Foundation. It was never going to be a big thing, but it was a nice way for 6 Fleischers to give $6,000 in, and for $6,000 help 6 young, amazingly smart students from a really difficult area of Kenya. And that was all it was. But as I kept on talking about it, it grew and grew and grew, and eventually the decision was made to come back and to build a school.
Yeah, and I know Vlad's going to dig in right now and ask a lot of questions around the model. But just before he does, I wanted to ask you, that first kid, you borrowed $1,000 from your dad. Where is he now and what is he doing?
Great question. Very proud to answer that one. The first student is a girl. Her name is Kafia Ali. She is the first person in her family to ever finish high school.
Oh, wow.
And she is the first person in her family to ever finish university. She had a small job at the end of university. It was a general business degree. Small job at the end of university, actually as a tour guide at one of the museums in Kenya. And while she was doing her tour guide work, she gave a tour to the owner of a bag company, a very, very high-end bag company. I think you probably both know it, a company called Sandstorm.
Wow.
And she just, according to him, she just had a panache about her. She had a strength to her tour. She had a strength of character, and it was something that he saw right from the tour. So she got a very, very basic job at Sandstorm, doing tour guides at Sandstorm's factories. They loved her so much, she got promoted. She's now a sales associate. And one of the very special things, and I'm taking away your ability to ask questions, but I have to plug this in. One of the very, very special things is you ask someone in the United States, if I gave you $100,000, what would you do? And you hear the same answers. Yeah. I'd buy a car, I'd buy a house, I'd go on vacation. But when you do the same question for someone in Kenya, especially kids from underprivileged backgrounds, you hear something very different. If you ask kids in Kenya in underprivileged backgrounds, if I gave you a lot of money, what would you do? They always say the same thing first. I would help my parents move out of the slum so they could live somewhere else. And to date, because the foundation's young, we're not that old, to date, Kafia's parents are the only family that we have not living in the slum because she pays for their rent to live elsewhere. And that's that ripple effect that we're trying to achieve.
Absolutely.
That's really fascinating. And maybe if you could just explain a bit more. So how does this project work? So you have a foundation, you're building a school, what you mentioned. How is it all going to work? The foundation, the investors are building a school, or can you maybe just explain the model?
Of course. So the model has changed. I'll tell you what the model was and what the model has transformed to be. The model was very simple. We had 0 overhead costs. We had nothing. We had no salaries. We had no office. We had nothing. We had a website that cost $200 a year that I paid for out of my pocket. It was very simple. We looked for people who shared in our vision, trying to help students who were really talented but from difficult places. They gave $1,000 a year. We effectively took that $1,000 with one hand, gave it to the school with our other hand, and that was it. That was all we did for the first couple of years. What then changed is after a couple of years of talking about this foundation in the United States, we were getting an overwhelming amount of support. We were now getting online donations that were recurring. We were getting bigger donations than just the 1,000. And a decision had to be made. What are we going to do now that we've had success that we never expected? Because remember what I said to you a few minutes ago, this was supposed to be 6 members of my family helping 6 kids. We never thought it was going to be what it is today. So now we have a lot of money, we have a decision to make. And I remember the meeting with the board. And the decision, the options were, let's continue doing a sponsorship program, but just make it gigantic. Let's not sponsor 5, 10 kids a year, let's sponsor 50 kids a year. The other decision was the scarier decision, which was instead of sponsoring kids to external schools, public schools in Kenya that massively vary in quality. Some are great, some are okay. What if we built our own school? And we ended up going that route. Now, the school route had two different options as well, and this was something we debated for quite a while in our board meetings. Option one was doing what a lot of charities do. Build a simple school, simple Mabati iron sheet infrastructure, build it in informal settlements, and operate, within a couple months. The other option was something radical that I don't think anyone is doing. I think it's something that makes us a little bit unique. Build a school of equality for ambassadors' kids. Build a school for the quality of the wealthiest of the wealthy, but dedicate it to kids who really, really need it. That's the path we've gone for, and that's a much more ambitious and a little crazy path.
Yeah, it's super interesting because as I mentioned, I grew up in Kenya and I was fortunate enough to go to a private school in Mombasa. And, the one thing that really fascinated me was our fellow school colleagues were not the smartest, but we were the most well-rounded, right? And I sometimes find that, the public education just focuses on just knowledge, but not the softer skills and how to adapt, which is really more important, in my view, about learning, right? And it's really brilliant that you're bringing that knowledge and that softer skill aspect into your schools.
I am, I think, comfortable to say in response to that, one of the reasons why we're building our own school is because we are unhappy with, for the most part, the level of education our kids are getting at the public schools. Yeah. The public schools are trying their very, very best to do the best they can do, and I think they are doing the best they can do given the infrastructure that exists. But when you have 100 kids in your class, when you sometimes don't have water in the school facility, you have to teach a little bit differently. Yeah. So we are very focused in public school education in Kenya on memorization, regurgitation. Yeah. Questions are often not encouraged. Questions are actually usually discouraged. Yeah. We'll explain something to you, you memorize it. We'll tell you 5 facts about this historical figure. On the test, you repeat those exact same 5 facts. And my students are brilliant. They have better IQs than me. But you gotta understand where they come from. They come from a very, very difficult background. My dad, every night in my house in New York City, was teaching me how to shake a hand and how to talk with conviction and how to, invest in the right product when, you have your retirement fund. The students we sponsor don't have that. They need some support to get them to where they deserve. And I think this school is going to be able to achieve that.
And it's super important because this is the age in which, people are molded, right? So if you don't give them the mold for them to allow and express themselves, then it carries on in the career. And Vlad and I, we've seen this when we've hired people who have been more from a conventional, for lack of a better word, educational system versus someone who's a little bit more open-minded educational system.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Well, that's very interesting. So basically, you have a foundation where we raised money to build a school in Kenya. Tell us a bit more about the school. So how big it's going to be? Where are you building it?
Yeah. So
and how it's going to work. So will students pay anything, or what is the kind of the model?
Totally understand. So Nairobi, to my surprise, land prices are through the roof. Yeah. To buy 5 acres of land in Nairobi, that's just impossible. And when I came to Kenya as a total newbie. I had no idea what I was doing. I had a certain amount of money that I thought, as an ignorant American, I could come to Kenya and I could build a palace of a school, no problem. I mean, I could build 12 schools with this amount of money. And I came and I found out that I barely had enough money to buy the land. Yeah. So that was a real shock. Coming to Kenya, I thought I was all ready to go and I had no idea what I was doing. Yeah. What we've decided to do is, again, we had 2 options. Buy land in Nairobi, common thing to build a school in, but you can only afford such a small plot of land that you're going to have to build upwards. So your school's going to look a little bit less like a school. It's going to look a little more like an apartment building. It's common. I know dozens of schools like that. We chose the different path. We chose, let's build it a little bit outside Nairobi. And it's not far. It's about 45 minutes outside the city. And we got 6 acres. And on the 6-acre plot, we're going to build a school that has all the facilities you can imagine, right? So we have a soccer pitch, we have a basketball court, we have art, drama, music areas, we have physics, biology, chemistry, we have boarding houses, we have laundry facilities, we have staff accommodation, and all of these buildings, if you can imagine it, are all going to be ground floor. That's how big the plot is going to be. So that's a general idea of the kind of school we're building. The other question I think you had was how many students? Yeah. I came from a school in New York, a school called the Browning School, that I'm very, very proud to be an alumni of. And the guy who started it, John Browning, believed that the whole focus of education needs to be around class sizes, so student-to-teacher ratios. And if you can accomplish that student-teacher ratio, that's a good ratio, most of the other things will get solved. Now, obviously, there are other problems, but that one is the big focus. So we have classrooms that are designed to hold 20 students to one. That's it. And I need to emphasize for our students, for the students that we support in Kenya, that is unheard of. They have never been in a class with 20 students. What you'll see from kids that we support is they sit in long desks. They resemble benches, not individual desks. We will not have any of that in our school. Individual desks, 20 kids to a class. We'll have 2 streams, so 2 classes for each grade. So we're aiming at roughly 40 students in each grade. It'll be high school, so there'll be 4 grades only. So we're looking at less than 200 students, 160 students, give or take.
Understood. And what is the selection process? What a kid needs to do? Because I assume there are many more kids than 40 in the country who would appreciate this kind of school.
Yeah.
How are you going to select kids?
We have a 3-step selection model now. And as you know, we already have a sponsorship program in place. So we already right now select students every single year, sponsor them for high school and university. We have a 3-step process that took us a while to master because frankly, selecting the right student is probably half the game, right? That's the most important thing. And we'll probably maintain that entire process. We might add a 4th step in. So step 1 is finding feeder schools, finding elementary schools from very, very underprivileged areas that will work with you. So we have 6 elementary schools with head teachers that just believe in what we're doing and want to see their brightest students not stop education at class 8, but continue. Part of that process is, unfortunately, it just has to be this way, doing a check on their GPA, doing a check on their grades to check how intelligent the student is. So we have a specific grade that we require on the national exam. As long as the student achieves this minimum grade that we have, they can apply. So that's step 1. Everyone who applies from these 6 feeder schools who meet this exam requirement make it to step 2, which is the interview process. The interview process is quite fun. It's something I came up with. We have 3 different interviewers. 1 is someone from my staff. 2 are 2 other successful Kenyans that I think are doing wonderful work. The 3 of them interview every single applicant that we have. We have 5 set questions that interviewers are welcome to ask more. And the questions are not complicated questions. They are not nuanced and they don't have some hidden agenda.
It's not the McKinsey type questions.
It's not the McKinsey type questions, thankfully.
Yeah.
They are, why do you want to go to school? Do your parents support you? What do you want to do when you grow up? And we instruct the interviewers to look for one thing. We're not looking for the most articulate answer. You can learn that, you can teach that. What we're looking for is grit. We're looking for ambition. Does this student want it that badly? Are they willing to do whatever it takes? Are they willing to figure it out? Are they willing to walk 20 kilometers if they had to school and back, if it means that they can make a difference for themselves and their family? So that's what we're looking for in that 2nd step. We average out all the grades and we make it to the 3rd step, which is the home visit stage. And the home visit stage is something we only added in about 2 years ago because we found that we learned some information that we think is critical to this process. So I'll give you a common example. In informal settlements and slums in Kenya, you'll often see families with a very large number of siblings. Families of 9, 10, 11, 12, that's not uncommon. What is also incredibly common is that the firstborn or the secondborn end up largely taking care of the rest of the siblings because maybe the parents are working, maybe it's a single mother household, which we find almost all of our students have. And for whatever reason, the oldest sibling ends up taking care of the family. And when we see that, when we see a student who maybe has an A-, not an A, but perhaps it's because they're taking care of their entire family unit, that touches us. And I think that's the factor that we include. So that's our 3-step process. We'll continue that way. What we'll add, because I've been talking to a lot of schools in Nairobi, and this has been advised to me by many, is having an internal exam. Having an exam that we create in-house. We invite our applicants to come to our school, and they take this exam. So that might be a 4th step that we added once the school's.
It sounds a bit like our selection process for portfolio companies. And we look exactly for the same characteristics in the entrepreneurs we select. But just expanding on that, so the first element is to get them into school.
Yeah.
The second element is how do you make sure you retain the best students and the ones who are probably, and I don't want to use the word taking advantage of the system. How do you make sure that you keep the quality of the student? You keep the grit that you first saw when they first entered?
We do something in our sponsorship program that I have to say, frankly, I don't think any of my American donors liked. And it was something I had to actually convince these guys that this was how we had to do it, because this was just the dynamic we were in. And we have a pretty strong rule: if you get below a B for an average, so for your average in the year, you're out of the program. You're gone. And that was a rule that none of my donors liked, because they want to support kids no matter what. But we have had to do it before. In our history, we've only done it twice. And I hope it's the right path. I very much believe it is. But I will say that every student sponsored by the foundation knows about this rule, and they know that it has been enforced. And as a result, they know they have to meet this expectation. And they all have it in them. We've really, in my opinion, we've mastered the selection process. These kids have the intelligence, but they know they have to meet a certain grade minimum. And I think because of that, they end up succeeding. So to this date, we've had two expulsions, if you will. We have not had to expel a student from the program in more than 5.
Okay. Well, I mean, that's understandable, because since every seat is super valuable, right?
And Stephen, what's interesting also, it's like you raised quite a bit of money. It sounds like a huge project. Who are your investors? And what's interesting to understand, because we all hear, this guy invested in Africa because they want to help kids. But who are they? What drives them? Because I assume you've spent quite a bit of time fundraising. And what are your what's the insight there?
Sure, yeah. So our fundraising model is very simple. If anything, it's too simple, and you both need to show me how to make it better and expand it more. Our model has always been friends and family. That's the only people who support this foundation are friends and family. What we have done more recently, because friends and family aren't going to cover it forever, is we do something very simple. We take someone who supports us and we say, hey, do you think someone else in your network might be interested in supporting a cause like this? And we've found that extension of degrees of separation has worked unbelievably well for us. So far, we are not in the grant space. We are not doing proposals. We're doing simple proposals for individual donors, but we're not doing presentations trying to get funding from US aid or UK aid or things like this. It is solely from individuals that we get our support from. Now, the second bit of your question was, what are the motivating factors for why these donors are giving? I'd say it's probably two things. One is, I think they believe in the cause. This is not a cause that's complicated, right? There are some complicated projects. I know you both deal with them, right? And those are causes, projects, investments that you have to convince the person on the other side of the table, this is something that's going to work. Yeah. Mine's not complicated. Mine's easy. Yeah. Mine's bite size. We take the smartest kids we can from the worst backgrounds possible, and we give them a chance to achieve a dream that they had no chance of achieving unless you jump in. That's something easy. And as we started, remember, it was only $1,000 to support a student for 1 year. It's about $80 a month. For most of the people in the US that we were asking money from, that wasn't a lot. The second thing I'll say, and I know this ties into your business, the second thing I'll say is the relationship. I think it is very important, especially when it comes to charitable work, that you are supporting someone that you believe in. You're supporting someone that will be a custodian of your funds and will use it, not for anything bad, but use it for all of the intentions that you said you would. And I think there's a lot of trust with the donors that I have, and that's been the second driving force.
You make it sound so easy. You make it sound really easy. And I think it also proves the point that as long as you can explain your idea in one sentence, it becomes much easier to fundraise.
Absolutely.
However, let me ask you, what is something that your donors don't know, what you wish them to know, and what would make your life and the whole fundraising process easier? Because at the end of the day, this guy sits somewhere far away in the US, and you are trying to, connect your school to electricity here.
It is very common in the United States to talk about some of the difficulties that exist in other areas of the world. What is not common is really understanding it. I have only had a few donors actually visit Kenya. 5, 6, 7 donors visit Kenya. And some of them want to see the school construction projects and want to see the work. But no matter what, I bring them to the school that I worked in for that year, the school in Mukuru-Kwanjenga. And every single one, the quality of the infrastructure, the nature of that slum, it is beyond anything they ever expected. When I came to Kenya, I did this project. I started this, not just because I didn't see students going to high school, but because when I saw Mukuru-Kwanjenga, I couldn't believe that a place like this existed. It just shocked me so much that I said, I have to get involved in some way. I have to try to make some small amount of impact, even if it's a tiny amount. If my donors could come and could see the situation that exists in this particular slum, I think it would be a gigantically motivating factor.
Yeah, I guess, Stephen, let's change a little bit the tact from the business model to yourself, because at the end of the day, a lot of this is dictated on you and you spearheading this project. The first question I have, which is one that I also ask my entrepreneurs that we invest in, is if you had a magic lamp today and you could turn back time, what would you change? I mean, let's say you rub this lamp, you're 5 years back, and you knew what you know today. What would you do differently? Just one thing only.
It's a great question. I wouldn't change any of the directions I'm going in. I'm very happy with the directions. I believe in the school project, I believe in the sponsorship project. One thing I would do differently is I would get more involved in certain areas that I thought were expertise areas. So I'll tell you what I mean. We're building the school. We have an army of consultants building the school. And like I said, this is not going to be a simple structure. This is going to be a very, very huge, complicated project. You need architects, you need quantity surveyors, you need engineers, you need project managers, you need all these things. And it was my opinion before I started this project that I have to let the experts be the experts. Yeah. What do I know about architecture? I'm not going to bother the architect. What do I know about quantity surveying? I only knew what quantity surveying was a couple of years ago. And don't ask me what it is, because I'm not sure I can explain it to you right now. So I did not get involved in these things that much. And that was a mistake.
Okay.
If I could go back in time, I would be challenging all of the consultants. I'd be challenging all of the drawings. I'd be challenging all of these experts a bit more. And I think that would create a better product in the long run.
And is that an influence of the continent we are in? Or is it just the nature of your business model, irrespective of whether you were in Africa or in the US?
I am not a smart enough guy to answer that question very, very well. But I'll say this. I think it is a universal thing that when you know your client is off the ball, when you know your client isn't really checking everything, you tend to slack off a little bit, right? And the same universal principle, I think, is true when you flip it, right? When you have a client who's questioning every single detail, when he's wondering why certain I's aren't dotted and when some T's aren't crossed, you rise up to that. You say, oh, no, Stephen, that school project, oh, he's really tough. We got to make sure this is perfect. Let's check that 5 times. And I think that's something that I did not take into account enough when I started doing the school project.
Interesting. And, you know, in entrepreneurship and in startups in particular, there's always a debate. What's better? How many entrepreneurs or founders should be there? 3, 4, 2, maybe 1. So I think there are many different examples in the world. You're in this alone, pretty much. You're building the school. You're living here. You're doing the fundraise by yourself. Would it help if you actually had a partner or something in this journey, or you're okay by yourself? What's your experience been?
It certainly has me spread thin. Managing operations, managing changes in circumstances, as well as fundraising is tough. And one of the things I said to you is that I want as much money as possible going to kids. Yeah. So we do a lot of things in-house. We do our bookkeeping in-house. We deal with pay slips in-house. We deal with payments for taxes, salaries in-house. We try to get as many dollars as we receive going in the right place. So it certainly has us spread thin. But one thing that is really amazing about Kenya, I mean, really fantastic about Kenya, is the number of quality people doing quality things. I have had many moments where I'm not sure which way to go on the fork in the road, but I don't have a shortage of people I can pick up the phone and call and say, hey, can you come over to my house today? Let's talk this through. Or, hey, can we go to the school? Can you look at these plans? Can you tell me if I'm making the right decision here or not? And I've always drawn that as a sense of comfort and support.
Yeah, especially doing such a noble cause that you're doing. I mean, I'm sure you have a lot of specialists and advisors experience to help you.
Absolutely.
I guess again more personally, I mean, what in your opinion, apart from grit, because I know you're going to say grit, I see that that's a common theme. Apart from grit, what do you think are the three main characteristics for a person trying to build something in Africa? It doesn't need to be a business, doesn't need to be a foundation, but comes from the US, from the UK, from Europe, lands in Kenya, and is trying to build something. What are the three strongest characteristics?
I might be ignoring your qualifier, but I'm going to try to go around it in a nice and respectful way.
Yeah.
Kenya's a wonderful place. I love living here, and I plan to live the rest of my life here. I just find that there's something very special about living in Nairobi. Alternatively, when you look at the US, and I think you can probably apply this to a lot of really developed places, they operate very much in an opposite way. It's much more efficient, but it's much less wholesome. I think people are much less happy back in these places than they are in Kenya, where I think most people that I know are very happy. They love what they do. They're doing exciting work. They have a great network of people around them. But things are not going to go the right way when you do business in Kenya. And that's going to happen all the time. And it's going to be a really big culture shock when if you go from a place where everything moves perfectly straight and everything happens very, very efficiently, and you come to Kenya where it doesn't. And that is going to happen all the time if you start a business here. Yeah. And you need to be someone who is able to not just have the grit to deal with those changes, but have the ability to adjust and change for those changing circumstances. Because things are just not going to be right. You got to be nimble. You got to be nimble. So that would be my number one advice for someone starting a business, starting a nonprofit, starting a charity, starting whatever they're starting in Kenya. I can speak with some authority on Kenya, not the rest of the continent. But things are not going to go your way. And frankly, most of the time, they're not going to go your way. Yeah. Are you someone who can handle that, or someone who can't, and it frustrates you? And I see a lot of people come to Kenya, they don't succeed, and they're just too frustrated by these changes. I see a lot of people who are nimble enough to adjust to it, and then they thrive here. Yeah. I think that's the number one thing to look for.
Yeah, and just pulling on that, and then I'll let Vlad interject. But you must have had so many times in the last 5-6 years that you said, "Oh shit, what the fuck am I doing here?" Right? I've hit rock bottom, and you still managed to go at it. What is that thing that made you say, "Okay, no matter how rock bottom I've hit, we still need to push"?
Everybody's different. Yep. Why I'm the way I am, I have no idea. But I will tell you both, the joy for me, and it really is a joy, it's my favorite thing. My favorite thing is to attempt to do difficult, impossible tasks and fight to achieve that result, no matter how hard things are. If things are easy, I personally get very bored.
Yeah.
If things are hard, that's when it gets exciting. We're building a state-of-the-art school for underprivileged kids. Yeah. This school, by every estimation, and I'm comfortable saying this out loud, by every estimation, this school is too nice, it's too expensive, and there is not a clear business model to figure out how we're going to cover the operations costs after we build this behemoth of a thing. Yeah. These are 3 legitimate problems. We're going to do it anyway. And invite me back in 2 years when I have this thing up and running, and it's going to happen. That excites me. That's fun. Winston Churchill has this great quote, at least I like this quote, and he defines success. And he says, success is moving from failure to failure to failure without any loss of determination.
Yeah.
I've taken that quote to heart. I just keep on moving. I don't stop. And as long as I keep on moving, I know I'll get there in the end.
Okay, so a lot of it is to do with how you're built.
Maybe.
You know, when you're listening to different stories and when people pitch to you, it all sounds so nice. But then when you actually look at what entrepreneurs are doing, it's like a horror movie. Something got locked. There is like someone forgot electricity cable, so you can't finish the project on time. Just a horror movie. But then when you pitch, everything looks so great and etc. So you are Stephen, who came from New York to build a school in Kenya. I mean, it sounds like a bit of a challenge there. So now you've been into this for what, 5 years?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, all right.
So tell us a few stories from your construction experience. How has it been from the ground?
I'll tell you.
How many things have gone wrong?
A lot of things have gone wrong. Too many. We're going to have to extend this podcast by 3 hours. Viewers, you tune out right now. I'll tell you one story of when we first started, when we first broke ground. We buy land, 6 acres, just outside Nairobi. So we're not in the city center. We're in a more rural area. And something you both know, but maybe something some of the viewers don't know, is that land has a different context than it does, at least where I'm from, the United States. United States, land is land. Here, there's a cultural importance to land. There's a prestigious importance to land. It's something that is difficult to explain. The neighborhood around the plot of land where I built my school was very, very concerned about some foreign New York guy buying land. Who knows what he's doing with it? There's all these different companies coming with briefcases and fancy cars. And it was different than what the normal goings-ons were in that community, and they were nervous about this. We start construction on a very basic phase of construction. We were simply building an electric fence, which is very common in Kenya, mostly to just stop cattle from getting onto your land. So we built an electric fence around the entire perimeter. We built a gatehouse, just a simple phase. The community contacted the construction workers, and the contractor came up and said, you have to take down this electric fence. It's electrified, has a current through it, and kids sometimes walk on this road and they might touch the electric fence and get electrocuted. So I said, please let them know. The electric fence is very, very low, electrified. It's not going to hurt anybody, with respect. This is our land. We're going to build the electric fence. It's fine. So, a week later, I think this whole thing is done. I get a call at 6 a.m. from the Maasai tribe watchman that I have on the land.
Yeah.
He calls me at 6 a.m. He says, sir, there are 40 people who want to see you. I said, 40 people? Who do they want to see me? It's the entire neighborhood. They understand you've refused to take down the electric fence, so they're here to destroy it. They're going to destroy the entire electric fence. They will do it right now unless I can tell them you're coming personally.
Oh, God. Sounds like a
6
nightmare.
in the morning on a Tuesday. So I get in okay, I'm coming. So I get in my car on Tuesday, 6 in the morning. I'm driving to the land. I was going to call my parents, let them know I was going. But it's 6 in the morning. With the time zone difference, I couldn't even call my parents.
Yeah.
So I'm driving, and I had the moment you described a moment ago, Paris. One of those eagle-eye moments of, what am I doing here? I could have been in New York, could have been practicing law. Where am I going? So I arrive at the site, and we sorted it out, right? We agreed to, in a few months, build a very, very simple fence in front of the electric fence, just to deter kids from touching the electric fence. And what I learned pretty quickly was it was less of a substantive issue, which is what I thought it was, and it was much more of we want to have your respect, that you will talk to us, and you will take our concerns seriously, and you'll have a dialogue with us. And ever since that was established, we've never had an issue since. But I cannot adequately describe how I was feeling.
Yeah,
when I was in the car at 6 a.m. with all the streetlights not working, and it was still dark at the time, driving to outside of the city center with 40 people with tools knocking down my electric fence that I just paid for.
Yeah.
So there's one story for you.
Interesting. And so since we are trying to, in this podcast, trying to share the insights, and I think, even for me personally, when I can see that when we sometimes try to put and touch entrepreneurs from different cultures, and they really struggle to communicate sometimes, and it's not necessarily kind of offensive or anything, but people just have different communication styles or different cultures, how people talk. And what's important for one is not important for another one. From your perspective, so you grew up in the US, so you're pretty much, you understand the American business culture very well. So if you are to give advice to an American entrepreneur who is coming to Kenya, what are the 3 things that, let's say, everyone should be aware of, which are completely different to the US, and what can actually, you may interpret wrongly and make wrong decisions?
So what I can say is I grew up in the US, but I grew up in New York. I grew up right in Manhattan. It has a culture of its own, right? I mean, I even struggled when I went to other areas of the United States because New York is such an efficient, aggressive, fast-moving place. One of my culture shocks when I first came to Kenya was that is inappropriate here, and maybe it should be inappropriate in New York too. I don't know, but we don't yell at people in Nairobi. We are polite no matter what, even when things go badly. And oftentimes yelling and pushing and shouting, that'll have the opposite effect, right? It won't inspire. I can tell you other funny stories in our next podcast about how some of my bosses in New York would yell at me and throw staplers at me and things like this. That drove me to work harder. Yeah. That doesn't work here. So that was a culture barrier that I had when I first came here. The other thing I'd say, and I'm not sure if this is a direct answer to your question, but it's something that you made me think of, is you need to really do your due diligence in Kenya when you're doing various business things. Yeah. When you're looking for an accountant, you can't just go on Google like you would in New York and type in accountant and pick the first person you find. You really, really have to be very, very careful in who you end up doing business with. And what has happened in Kenya, in my opinion, is we exist even in professional business spaces with this referral network. So when you need a good accountant, when you need a good lawyer, when you need a good architect, you talk to the people that you know and you trust. That is essential. You need to have the right people around you. And I think another piece of advice I'd give to anyone trying to come to Kenya to do business is find those people that you really know and you trust, and then you can leverage that and use that network to succeed at whatever you're going through. But those are two things that I can quickly think of that I struggled with. I started this charity completely by myself. I knew no one in Nairobi. I lived just outside the slum when I was living here. I did everything wrong. I had the wrong lawyers who incorporated the company in the wrong way. I had the wrong accountants. I had the wrong everybody. So finding that network, I think, is really essential when you come to Kenya.
No, that's very interesting. I think another interesting topic to discuss is like overall this business model of charities and like different organizations that help kids or whoever is like some people are skeptical about them because not everything reaches the end beneficiary. Paris has in particular a very strong opinion of this.
Yeah, I'm allowed to say this because I'm Kenyan as well, right? And the statistics I've read, or I've heard, sorry, I haven't read, I've heard, is that only 20 to 30% of the actual donations and reach the end beneficiary who it's meant to be made for. The others are just really expensive overheads, right? You've seen how the UN drive these big fancy cars, right? Yeah.
So in your case, I don't know if you are able to share that. I know that your expenses are bare minimum. What is like roughly how much of all your donations and reach end beneficiaries, and how you're able to achieve that?
Yeah, so I have a lot of thoughts about this. First of all, Paris, I completely agree. Yeah. It is something that you see in Kenya all the time. There's a charity on every corner. I mean, on every corner there's a charity. Whether the money is going to the right place or not is highly questionable. And I'll tell you something I don't usually say a lot. There was a part of the story that I didn't tell you. Yeah. I didn't start the foundation immediately. What I did was I gave the money to a different charity. I didn't want to start a charity. Yeah. I gave the money to a different charity to sponsor the students that I was supporting. So our 6 Fleischers were giving money to this other charity. And it was just clear the charity was not using the money properly. Students were being sent home for lack of fees. Students were supposed to get uniforms I sent money for and they weren't getting it. So I had the same frustration, which is why I started something myself, just to make sure it was going in the right place. In the US, there's a lot of metrics that you use to judge the quality of a charity. One of them is something called Charity Navigator, which checks all of your audits, all of your financial statements, all your tax returns, and it goes through them to determine a rough estimate of how much money is going to the cause. We are very proud that we're almost always over 90%. So over 90% of the funds that come in go right to the kids. So we are a very, very lean organization. Almost all of our service providers are either doing work pro bono for us, or they're doing it at highly discounted rates. So that's very important for us.
Yeah, I'll start, and then I'd love to hear Vlad's opinion as well. But the one thing that, and I mentioned this when we were talking, the one thing that really, really resonated was your selection process, right? You mentioned that you in your stage 2, you look for that when you have the interviews, you look for the grit, right? And that's exactly what we look for entrepreneurs, right? That they have no plan B or C. Everything that is plan A, B, and C is what we're investing in, right? So when it comes to, I'll talk about the way we select entrepreneurs is very similar to the way you select students. I don't know, Vlad, if you wanted to add from a different point of view.
I think what you said, what in your selection process, it's the grit, what's important. And I think what keeps you going is your passion, passion for the country, passion for the cause, passion for your school. And I think in our experience is like, I can say it's even about our investors. Those who are truly passionate about what we do have been our biggest supporters. Those entrepreneurs with the grit are those who survive no matter what. There are some entrepreneurs, which, especially from frontier markets, sometimes you think, God, this is done, it's over. You cannot survive this. The country is closed, the quarantine, let's just write it off. Right. And then this guy calls you and said, no, it's fine, I'll just accomplish all my CPs. For me, I'm used to live in a crisis. It's okay.
Yeah, I think the one additional thing to add is, so that's on the investment side and our portfolio side, right? While Vlad and us, I mean, what people don't know, and this is something we don't publicize until we probably fourth or fifth conversations with entrepreneurs when they know us, and why I believe some entrepreneurs really value having us on board is we are entrepreneurs as well. Right? We're in the business of investing, but we're entrepreneurs. I mean, the amount of crap that Vlad and I have had to deal with, whatever you've said.
On your own business side.
Yeah. We've dealt with that, right? We've dealt with that. We've run out of money. Yeah. We've had, team leave us. We've had to pivot the business model so many times. We've been called at, God knows, middle of the night with things. A lot of what you say resonates with Vlad and myself as well.
Well, I'll ask you both one more question. I don't know if I can come up with 5, but I have one more question that is absolutely resonating with me during this talk, which is there a synergy? Is there an intersection between charitable work, totally dedicated to helping some kind of charitable cause, and investment work? Is impact investing the way of the future, where you're investing and you're focusing on having an impact, or is impact investing not the thing that we want to do?
Yeah, so I'll start, right? I think the one key word which both sections or parts of the equation that need to focus is sustainability, right? So whatever you achieve to do and how you achieve it, whether it's through commercial investments or charitable work, it's really important in my view, and this is more personal, but my view that both of them have to be sustainable, right? And that's why it's super interesting to me what you said around that 90% of actually donations go to the end beneficiaries, right? Because that makes it sustainable. Growing up in Kenya, I remember I had a hospital, and this hospital was funded by German government money, but a lot of it was for expenses that were not directly related, right? And what happened then later on, it shut down, right? So I think even whether it's charitable or whether it's commercial businesses, they have to be done in sustainable manners, right? That's the one intersection I can see. I don't know, Vlad, if you have any.
I think, completely agree. And I think what you're doing, you're trying to change the face of this charitable work. And again, I think there is a lot of skepticism around this. But I think if we could rank all the charities and say, like, this is a A-class charity where 90% of the funds reach end beneficiary. And this is, E-class where only 10% reach end beneficiary. We could do that. I think we could really help and improve this charitable work. And what we are trying to do with our fund, we are trying to change kind of the face of impact ecosystem. We are trying to say that impact needs to be sustainable. There needs to be commercial returns as a backbone of the impact returns. And it always comes together. And that's what we are trying to show and prove with our investment thesis.
I think you both are doing a phenomenal job. I've known you both for 5+ years. I'm honored that you picked me to be your first guest on this podcast. And I think we're both doing some incredible work in different ways. So,
thank you. And just wait a minute, you're not off the hook. Vlad has a surprise, last-minute surprise for you. So over to you, Vlad.
Very quick questions, fireside chat. Quick answers, quick question.
One word answers.
One word answers.
One
Got
word
it.
answers.
If if we take any famous person, and it can be anyone, and like an entrepreneur, a superstar, Hollywood actor, doesn't matter. Who is your role model?
Well, I said it earlier, and I admire him for a couple different reasons. Had some good things, had some bad things. Churchill.
Rum or tequila?
Tequila.
What's your favorite place in the world?
Great Cliff Restaurant, Nassau, Bahamas.
Running or weightlifting?
Weightlifting.
What's your favorite movie?
Count of Monte Cristo.
If it was not Kenya or US, where would you live?
Cape Town, South Africa.
Thank you very much, Stephen. I think it was a great interview. Thank you for all the insights. And thank you. We're really happy to have you as the first guest in our podcast.
My pleasure, guys. Podcast is a wonderful idea. I'm sure you're going to have some great conversations going forward. Keep it up, and thank you for having me.
Thank you.
Thank you.